As the world soaks in the deep pause, given the current events, social justice is finally a movement that's on the top of our minds. I will be dedicating at least one panel per conference on the topic until we fix this. Alex Campbell and Paul Scott will be leading the discussion. Thank you and take it away.
Susan, and welcome to the panel on social equity. This is my friend Paul Scott. We also have Felicia Carvajal, Saskia Van James, and I believe Lynn Lyman. I saw her somewhere. Is she here right now? I'm gonna start with Felicia. She can talk a little bit about what social equity means to her, and then we can move on to all the other panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So hi everyone, my name is Felicia Carvajal or Felicia Carvajal, whichever one you can pronounce. Thank you so much, Susan, for your dedication to being truly inclusive and figuring out pathways. So thank you for being a leader who leads with love. We need a lot more leaders to be able to lead with love like that. So in terms of what is social equity, I think that's a very complicated, big conversation that not everybody is really prepared to look through it through this huge lens. I know that I worked with Lynn and a host of others in Los Angeles to begin to really unwrap what social equity looks like in cannabis from that lens. I mean, part of me wants to say in cannabis, social equity is a shit show, and social equity has been not treated with the dignity and respect that those of us who come from those communities deserve. I'd go on to say that many of our white leadership throughout the cannabis industry have failed us and continue to fail us by not listening to us usually, and wanting to rewrite it some other way that's going to translate differently. So, I mean, we know what social equity is supposed to look like theoretically, but right now we're just trying to figure out what that looks like. So social equity to me, it looks like a work in progress that I know that I've dedicated my life to being able to fight to ensure that true equality is reached. And without social equity, we can't have equality.
Thank you very much. Lynn, can we hear from you briefly?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you again, Susan, for having me and for having this panel. Lynn Lyman, I am a justice advocate and a drug policy expert working to end mass incarceration and end racism in criminal justice and other social control systems. I am the former California director of the Drug Policy Alliance, where in 2015 and 16, I co-authored and co-chaired Proposition 64. My work has always been about advancing, thanks, Paul. My work has always been about advancing social justice and racial justice. And I really saw marijuana legalization as a means to do that, and that's what I was most excited about. As a white person, you know, I have been able to use cannabis without repercussion for decades. And so for me, this was really about equalizing the playing field so that all people would have access to this plant without criminal justice ramifications. And so social equity, cannabis social equity, is the attempt and the intention to repair some of the harm that has been done to communities of color and especially Black people in this country throughout cannabis prohibition. I think everybody knows by now that the war on drugs was waged and raged primarily against people of color. And what's so disturbing is that this continues to today. If you look at marijuana arrests for possession, they continue to disproportionately target Black people, even here in California. And I'm happy to get into some of those numbers as we move through this conversation. And also just to add that the social equity experiment in California has been an abject failure. What happened in Los Angeles City Council this week is the first sign and the first true step towards enacting some kind of impactful social equity program. We'll see if it works. I am hopeful. But thus far we failed, and everybody has to do better. And one of the worst things, and Felicia and I talk about this all the time, is you have all these poser groups coming in and pretending like they're doing the work. Well, exactly. While groups like Felicia's, like the Hood Incubators, like Indica, these groups can't get pennies from the industry to do the real social justice, social equity work. And the posers fly in, grab the money from all of your companies and fly out. And I say, we've had enough. You want to know who to give your money to? Ask Felicia, ask me, ask Bo Money. There's a few people who know where the work is happening. And so I encourage everybody to stop giving money to the poser groups.
I agree. The system in California was gamed by corporations. And in Los Angeles, it's a joke. And it was city council insiders enriching themselves. It's full of corruption. And hopefully someday that story will come out. In the meantime, a lot of entrepreneurs lost a lot of money. And I don't know how we can even expected to stay in business for 3 years waiting. It's awful. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to move on. We'll introduce Saskia Van James. Thank you very much for attending this morning.
Sorry, guys. Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing today? I'm trying to fix my camera real quick. Sorry. Technical difficulties. My name's Saskia, and I'm from MRCC, and I'm social equity lobbyist and board member. And in Massachusetts, it has been, I came into the game in Cambridge. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we have the wealth of education, right? We have Harvard, we have MIT, we have like Lesley, like we have colleges just right here, sitting right here. And they said they was gonna make cannabis recreational. And I was just like, wait a minute, you're gonna have all this money come through my town and you don't think I, a Black woman, have something to say about that? So I made sure to bring my ass down to City Hall, and I was instrumental in assisting to pass a historical ordinance where it put social equity, it's a social equity ordinance where it puts economic empowerment applicants first as far as licenses from the city of Cambridge. And the city of Cambridge was contested because we had a flood of medical, big canna and white cis men coming into Massachusetts, placing their bets on the medical industry and wanting them to convert under recreational. And we had a company called Revolutionary Clinics who sued the city a couple of times back and forth to contest it because they wanted to fly under the radar and consider themselves social equity, and for medical to be considered social equity underneath the ordinance. And my city fought back and said no. And so our ordinance stands today, and I'm very proud of it. We also, in the city of Cambridge this year, passed a historical measure. It was the first mayor to be a Muslim woman in the city of Cambridge. So we're making, it's sad that we're at this point, but this is where we're at in the city of Cambridge, and that's what got me into it. And then I realized that what was happening here in Cambridge is happening in all cities across the state of Massachusetts, and it's even worse. We have federal corruption charges going on against mayors, bribes being taken. I went through some real nasty crap with my own city councilors here, where they put the city seal on a flyer saying some fund for $5 million is got a city seal for approval. And that was put out by a city councilor. And that $5 million is nothing when it costs $10 million just to get one through. So for me, which brings me to my point, what is social equity? Social equity is, to me, it can be simplified because it's an incredibly nuanced subject. So social equity is about practicing intersectionality. And if you're not practicing intersectionality, then you are not discussing social equity. That's the starting point right there. That's where the conversation always must start there. Practicing, not knowing it, not discussing it, not chatting about it, doing the work. Action, that's what it is, action. And it's about intersectionality. And so when you have intersectionality practicing, the only way for this to truly exist, to give people true empowerment and ownership, is through cooperation. And through MRCC, we're championing for cooperatives, because right now the whole system has been written and constructed by white cis men, and they've created it in a pyramid style where it's one and it always trickles down. And we're saying that's not the vision that we have as a cannabis industry, because for us, before you decided to call it a black market, what it really is the traditional market. And the way the traditional market works is, truth be told, you don't even need $1 million. You don't even need 5,000. You can cop in the game off a consignment. So the way you guys got this system set up isn't the way it works. And nobody wants your scraps off your table. We have our own table here. It works perfectly fine. And as was eloquently stated before, the people in power want to go ahead and retwist what we're saying. And so you can donate $10 million. You can do that if that's what you choose to do. However, if you're choosing to choose, even black exceptionalism is not going to get us there, you guys. It's not going to work. One by 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 one. That's individualism is a sold idealism to the American psyche. It's not going to work, you guys. We have to move. We have to get groups of people in together. We have to move as a village, and we have to move together. So to me, that's what social equity is that moving together, having cooperation, having community, and practicing intersectionality.
I thought a great name for a cooperative about 10 years ago would be the cooperative. That's a model that has been used in agriculture for 200 years. Why are we doing that in cannabis?
Yeah, it works.
Beautiful if we could do that. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Paul Scott. I'll just introduce him quickly. He was the first African-American dispensary operator in the world, I think. Am I right, Paul? Anyway, Paul, please talk about what social equity means to you.
I don't know. What's up, folks? Especially Lynn down there who did that Prop 64. Girl, you saved my black ass. Appreciate you. So that being said, folks, sometimes in life you think you could do something and then you succeeded and move on. I did something in terms of the importance of getting this plant to sick people. And that's about as far as I thought about this whole industry thing. And if I thought I could do that and save folks' lives, and that was my goal. I'll go to jail for it. I'll die for it. That was my goal. And that was really my only goal. It never really thought of being commercial or I'm going to make a bunch of money or I just, if I wanted to do that, I could have done that selling weed on the corner years ago. It was a cause. It was a reason. And successfully, I succeeded in that reason. And when I found that I had succeeded in that reason, I felt like I can move on because I never really was about selling weed, or selling cannabis. It never was an inspiration of mine. But that being said, fast forward today, and I just left Houston to my niece's same-sex wedding, and I'm in the room with a bunch of nieces and nephews, black nieces and nephews, and all of them are puffing, And I recognize none of them have a clue about how to grow weed, how to find a clone. All they know is commercial. All they know is, let me go buy this from someone. Let me go get a pound and make some money from it. That's been so ingrained to us that that's basically all we know. And I see some of them really trying to get into this way. They're in their 30s. I'm 57. So this my nieces and nephews. They're now trying to ask me, who they consider a founder, how can they get into it? And I'll be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure because I know the requirements to get into this game. And I know what it has become. And I know that if you try to comply with all that, you're still going to get somebody right around the corner who's going to be undercutting you. So it's nice to see you women taking care of us men, which is just so innate to do that. Look at on this panel, Susan and Felicia and Cecilia. Just look at y'all, man. Y'all always take care of our men. Thank you for that, because we get distracted. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you. But that being said, I'm hearing the social equity, and it should be. I don't know what it is, because if they make all these regulations, it's going to be tough for any, mom and pop to comply. If it's got to get tested and it's got to be 1,000 feet from anywhere and it's got to have this and it's got to have that, only a few people can really do that. I'm happy to engage in the conversation. It certainly should be there. The answers are right here. And, again, I'm happy to engage in however I can to look at that idea. But again, back in the day, before anybody was thinking about any of this, there were sick people dying. And I thought to bring this plant to them. And I did so successfully. and I'm happy about the whole damn thing.
Susan, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what we discussed last week when you did a practice panel about where the responsibility lies in people like you and me.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I've been talking about this a lot, and wow, my eyes have really been opened even more. They keep opening, and you know, it's I forget who the comedian was that said, you know, we're just starting from just say Black Lives Matter, and that's just so ridiculous that's all we're not even willing to say that, you know, but just at the bottom line, can we just say Black Lives Matter? And it's the folks that I've been talking to are tired, and they've been struggling, and we're going to them and we're saying, what do you want us to do? And they don't want the burden of that on their shoulders along with everything else. So it's really our job to fix what we created. And that's what I want to do. You know, that's why I've dedicated at least one panel every month on this topic until I die or we fix this.
One model I'd like to put out there, which we've always talked about, which Richard Lee and I talked about in Amsterdam 15, 20 years ago, is the coffee shop model, where one man, one woman can run a small warehouse and sell the cannabis in a coffee shop. I wish LA would do that, would allow that to happen. We could have real competition. People could grow and be vertical, but you know, just having a retail store that just sells cannabis is not going to allow an entrepreneur to succeed, in my opinion.
I agree.
So, and I know I'd like to now be quiet the rest of the panel because no one wants to hear from me.
So can I
Take it over.
respond to that one, Paul? So I also work at a bicycle cooperative, and we're a 30-year-old cooperative here in Cambridge, and we're a pretty little hipster spot. It's a little hole in the wall, and we're kept alive by the community. We've been there for the community. We don't rip off the community. We don't sell bikes unless we know you absolutely are gonna love it. People come in, we're like air and oil free. Like, we're not trying to upcharge people. We're very, very community centered. And you know, you walk in and you see all the signs. We're very clear on who we are as our values, as a cooperative for the community. And having that practice of being in a cooperative setting, I realized that it's much more rich than just an entrepreneur setting. Because what happens is when you have a worker-owner cooperative, you're giving everybody a slice of the pie instead of giving them crumbs. And so what happens is everybody's sense of purpose for the day when they come in, it's no longer focused on survival because their income, there's pay transparency, so there's no competition, so it's a healthier environment. Everybody's income is equalized because it's based upon workload instead of titles. And titles are just a reflection upon workload rather than being denoted upon your position in the cooperative. As well as just the values. Like, we have a daily check-in. How is everybody feeling today? You know, before we get started on the shift. Like, little things like that just really make a healthy workspace of caring for people's mental health and being there in spirit and in flesh versus just being there in flesh as a robot, checking in, focused on your tasks only. And there's a shift that happens. Instead of being working by terrorism, which is the tradition of America, to inflict work through the horrors of terrorism. Instead of inflicting work through the horrors of terrorism, you're able to double your productivity, double it through the works of joy. And so people, when they're joyful, actually produce more work. And so it doesn't really make sense to be forcing production through terrorism when, if you really want to double the production value, then have people work through joy. And you will see that their workload will double. They'll max out in their production every day, joyfully coming in, being upset that they can't make it in. So that's just one thing. I am an anti-capitalist. I'm not, to be clear, I'm not for this, so we won't go back and forth on this panel because I'll just be like every single time like ding. But I do believe in community, and I do believe that we can work together. And I do know that right now there's a whole lot of shit going down where people just want to pretend and float money. And really somebody like Jeff Bezos, you know, has all the money to give everybody $1 million and still be content. That's not what it's occurring. So there's a fakeness that's going on as far as—
Saskia, can we just take a little minute to absorb what you just said? Because when you first said that to me, I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem, but then I did the math and I was like, what? Yeah, wow. Jeff Bezos could give every American $1 million and it wouldn't really affect his bottom line.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It wouldn't be a sweat. It wouldn't be a sweat. And so if you really care about humanity, right? Because we're at a very, very, very holy place as an earth, right? Where we can either shift into a golden age or we will shift into darkness. And people very, very, you have to wake up today, like right now, you have to wake up and understand the pressing matter of this right now, of where we're at right now. And so when you're in a position like that, if you know that dude, tell him, like, it's really simple, mutual aid, direct aid, stop the bullshit, cut the bullshit. You know how it goes down. You guys know business. Like poor Black people are not stupid. If the bottom line is the bottom line, and there's a whole lot of paper flying around, a whole lot of words flying around, but at the end of the day, it's not trickling down. And so at the end of the day, it's not working. And what I'm trying to tell you is just practice intersectionality, cooperate, motherfuckers. That's what I've been saying to people. Cooperate, motherfuckers. And we're all in this and we can do this. It's not that complicated. We could just break it down real simple. And there's people that have been saying this. Poor Black people have been saying this. I'm not the first to say it. I'm constantly learning. Let me be clear, because racism is about programming. So you have to deprogram. So everybody has to deprogram. There's so many people that have been sold that Black exceptionalism will save them, you know? And so there's a lot of us still awakening that that's not gonna work for the majority. What you getting ahead and pulling somebody behind you is not gonna work fast enough for right now what we need today. We need groups. Do you hear me? Harriet Tubman, one by one, she had groups. We need an economic railroad at this point in the cannabis industry. That's what's going on in Massachusetts. Like, we have to establish, because 96% of the land is white owned.
If I could jump in on what's going on in Los Angeles, because I do think that with what happened last week, we are getting closer. I mean, it's still within the capitalist structure, because those are the regulations we have in California and in the city of LA. But what happened actually just yesterday, City Council took a final vote to approve Cat Packer's new amended LA City Ordinance, which allocates all remaining retail and delivery licenses exclusively to social equity applicants. We have been going through this piecemeal, you know, a few here, a few there, this percentage there, this percentage here. And finally, we have some real regulation with teeth. The mayor still has to sign it. We expect him to sign it, and we expect this to go into effect as soon as next week. Again, I'll say it, all remaining delivery licenses and retail licenses through the end of 2024 will go to social equity applicants. This is a huge win. This is the kind of bold, you know, regulatory positions we want to see our cities taking all across the state and across the country. We had so many of our white cannabis operators get on that public comment and complain that it wasn't fair and it was this and it was that. You know, was Felicia, me, Bo, just a few of us on there saying, yes, this is fair. The war on drugs wasn't fair. The war on drugs didn't target everybody equally. And so if we're looking to do some reparative justice work through cannabis legalization, then we absolutely have to give an advantage to the people who were most impacted. And the reason we can't do coffee shops in LA, Alex, is that state law doesn't allow you to sell anything, not even water, if you're selling cannabis right now. So you can't sell cannabis and coffee in the same physical location. So there's a lot of work to do on just working out these regulatory pieces. But what we want to see is this kind of bold action in all these cities where they make a real commitment to these social equity licensing regimes.
And then because I like to push people to always be better. So one of the things Susan had brought up was about this learning curve for everyone. So for me, as a person who was a young queer person who got involved in this movement because my friends were sick, oh, are you okay, Paul? And needed access. And this was in the mid-90s. And I always think of that the first time I was up in Humboldt and I got to stand on the top of that hill and smell everything. And I say that to say that, like, you know, that's my hippie heart hurts every time I see somebody in the industry willfully be duplicitous and actively engage our local officials against us. So like for me, the regulations are great, you know, it's still been piecemealed. The bigger question is who's really running off with the bag? Because Felicia is a little bit of a chola, not just a hippie. So she's wondering who's running off with the bag and being cognizant that in most cities across this country, they're utilizing these tax dollars to go into general funds that continue to fuel the police, which is kind of asinine when we're at this juncture right now. Like, that makes zero sense. And we've had an industry kind of just silent about that. I know that the other day I was on a conversation and I had to pull somebody, well, actually I did it, everybody on the Zoom, and I was just like, hey, you guys have actually participated against social equity. You've never supported us before. You're here now. I'm a little triggered. I'm a little confused, and I'm also trying to get down to the bottom of it because what do you want? And we know that we know what the industry wants. Like as an organizer, I know what the industry wants. You guys want lower tax rates for us, right? Because it's not for you, even though I've had to explain to people who are in the industry on numerous occasions, they're upset because they have to hold this bag and then give it to the local regulators to be able to dole it out however, but ultimately it comes from us. And the reality of the situation is we still have so much work to do. In the city of Los Angeles, we don't have a community reinvestment fund that's specifically taking some of those cannabis dollars. We also have an entire industry in Los Angeles who, with the exception of like 45 of the license holders, actually participated in a community-led corporate social responsibility analysis project. When I get back from communing with my ancestors in the desert, I'm going to release that report, because right now we just have a lot of work if we're going to have true equity. So independent of a license, independent, I mean, we know we need economic development. That's a no-brainer. Like, but there's so many other things off of the box that we have to tick to be able to truly help communities that have been harmed the most, because that harm, as Lynn pointed out, still is happening, guys. Like, while people are puffing comfortably and making money and doing all of these things, there are still a little black boy up against a wall being frisked down, scared, all because he has a joint in his pocket. One last thing is, listen to our Black leaders, guys. Like, I don't think the community has been listening enough for the last 3 years. Like, Lynn and I have been pointing, and we've got to really start treating them with the dignity and respect that they deserve for their lived experience to be able to give us the solutions that we're looking for as a whole. I mean, I'm saying this as a non-Black person of color who, fellow white people, we can do better. We got to.
Thank you.
Well, we have a whole lot of time to listen right now.
I just want to, can I just share? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, you guys, the legislation that made cannabis legal, it's called 94G. And in 94G, there's section 14. And section 14 is about marijuana funds, where the tax funds will be dispersed to. And one of the several categories is municipal police trainings. So if anybody on here really is a Black Lives Matter person, please feel free to send a letter, call, or tweet my governor and ask him, why is cannabis tax money going to pay municipal police trainings in the state of Massachusetts? I just want to know. I can't get a response. Maybe you guys can.
I actually have a panel at 3:45 today about policing in the cannabis industry. And on our practice session, we spent the bulk of our time talking about that. So tune in at 3:45 for that panel.
Please do.
And related to this conversation about policing, you know, and Black Lives Matter, one of our greatest demands is defund the police. Defund the police is intimately connected with marijuana legalization. Because if you look right now, the leading arrest made in the country today is still for marijuana possession. So that is the main thing we are paying police to do. And everybody really needs to understand that. So we have actually had an increase in marijuana arrests since 2016, believe it or not. Since, you know, a whole bunch of states legalized, including California, Massachusetts, we've had an increase. And when you look at who's getting arrested for cannabis, it's still grossly, disproportionately Black people, as well as Latinos. We don't really have the data on Latinos because they don't collect that data accurately. So we don't have that, but we know it's happening, but we don't have it. But let me just tell you, in our liberal California, where we legalized in 2016, we started our regulation system in 2018. In that year, 2018, we still had over 5,000 marijuana possession arrests in California. And most of them are disproportionately targeting Black people. You're still 2 times more likely in California if you're Black to get a marijuana possession arrest. But if you look at certain counties, I heard somebody say Humboldt, 5 times more likely if you're Black. You better not go smoke a joint in Humboldt if you're Black, because you're 5 times more likely to be arrested there for possession, which makes no sense to me because we legalized possession fully for adults in 2016. And one of the reasons why these sorts of numbers are still so bad, one of the reasons why is because one of the saddest things that has happened as a result of cannabis legalization is that the marijuana movement died. And that movement has been fueled by activists like many of us on this call, by those people who were in the trenches doing that medical work that both Felicia and Paul talked about. There's a huge history of people who got us to this moment. And yet a lot of people from the business side think, you know, marijuana legalization just fell from the sky. It was their opportunity to get rich. They don't, first, they don't learn the history. They don't learn about how many people died and suffered and lost their families and their farms and everything else. But it's one of the things that happened because of legalization is just, people don't understand this. The marijuana legalization movement was always funded by philanthropists, right? So that is how we did our work. That is how we legalized in California. The industry didn't pay for it. The industry's never paid for it. But what's happened is that since we legalized
19, Lynn.
Okay, the philanthropists have, and Prop 19, yeah, the philanthropists have pulled out. They've said, you know what? We're making millions and billions. We're not going to fund this work anymore. So they pulled out. But the industry hasn't come in to fund the public sector, public interest cannabis policy work. And so there's nobody funding it. And so those of us who do this work, there is no money for it, which is why you can still have 5,000 roots in California where we're 100% legal, because there's nobody tracking that. There's nobody keeping law enforcement accountable. And on a national scale, again, last year we arrested 700,000 people for marijuana. 90% were for possession. So things aren't great, and everybody acts like the only thing that matters is their bottom line.
Yes. Yes. The bottom damn line. That's what everybody's so focused on. You're absolutely right about that. Everybody's so focused. It's in Massachusetts. It's the exact same thing. It's so disgusting. Me and my team, we're always disgusted by the greed that occurs. Like, there's a major, you know, the CDA in Massachusetts, they're a major nonprofit. Everybody on their board owns a dispensary. It's like dispensary owners. And so it's just a bunch of rich people, you know, and so they're double-handing. They're double-sided. So they're playing both sides. So they're on the medical side, but also they have their front and the nonprofit side. And so they're getting a lot of money, you know, but they're already well-funded and everything like that. And so they're setting the standards of what is social equity. They're influencing that conversation. We have people in Massachusetts that are paid actors that have sold their social equity licenses. So Black capitalists cannot be trusted because they're selling their own license for their own personal gain, and then advising things as far as social equity that's really not social equity at all. It's completely deceitful, and the things that they're advocating for. The major nonprofit that runs the biggest cannabis rally called Freedom Run, it's always this shit with white people, revolutionary clinics, Freedom Run, something about them. They always like to see, this is the thing about racists, and this is what I say about them. They're just like pedophiles, you guys. I watched the R. Kelly documentary. Swear to fucking God, racists and pedophiles, they have the same psychological profile, hiding in plain sight, grooming. They had us in school, 12 years of root memorization, and can indoctrinate a mind for a racist profile. So they've been grooming us in childhood, and then hiding in plain sight, and then predatory behavior, which we see. You know what I'm saying? So these are the things that's occurring. And the Freedom Rally is ran by MassCan. And my organization, MRCC, you could check us out on Facebook. We just had to rip them a new one. We just ripped their asses a whole new one. You know, their logo has a colonist on it. Their president was found to have a straight pride march rally, some bullshit, some Blue Lives Matter, attending all that nonsense and everything. Like, it was just a hot mess. And people are like, they had an emergency meeting last night. One of them had to resign. The other one, there's a special meeting going on. The other one's gonna get removed. But the thing about it is, what's really sad is that conversation took over a year. This conversation took over a year. It was discovered about them a year ago. And everybody on the board protected them. So everybody on the board is fucking complicit. And I've been saying all their sponsors are complicit, because all of the sponsors are complicit that supported that, because you knew for a year who the fuck they were. So you kept on supporting it. So you can't just get rid of one bad apple. They all got to go. And not only that, they also have to be operating as a cooperative, because it's not about you profiting off of a community. And no, stop it. Stop profiting off of the culture. Then and creating a gateway where the culture has no access to that wealth. That model is dead, baby. That colonial perspective, that mind is gone, you guys. This new generation, they're not feeling that. Not in Massachusetts. You can see it. It's very different, and across the country, right? We've got teenagers sending messages via TikTok. They fucking memorize the algorithms, and they're sending messages to major corporations because they're sick of the shit. Like, we're in a very, very advanced place as a society right now, and I think it's really hard to grasp everything that's going on. But it's very important to like stay very, very simple and focused. But yeah, they're crazy in Massachusetts. It's just craziness all around, and it's a constant norm of white supremacy. Like, they actually defended it's not a colonial on the comments. It's not a colonial. He's a Minuteman. I was like, are you serious, people?
Saskia, I've got a question from the audience I'd like to ask you. From Kenneth Walton. He asks, how can we make the structural changes to eviscerate racism and implicit bias by relying on cannabis, stimulus, and equity programs?
Only support worker-owner cooperatives that have a strong diversity and positive impact plan for their community. They have to have those things. If it's not, do not give your money. Freeze your money right now. And only for the next dollar that you give out, only give it to a worker owner cooperative in cannabis. If they are not pulling the whole team forward, fuck them. It's a
And
new
also
day
be a little cognizant, because some of those who in California who've learned the game are still actually participating in oppressive language.
Yes.
They're still forgetting
Yes.
what diversity and inclusion looks like. It's just a workaround. We know that we have that issue in California. I know that I'm dealing with that issue and requesting simple things like, hey guys, take some anti-oppression training classes. I don't do them, but I have a long list of friends who are experts who can come in and, help you guys get your things together. So there's a long list of things that have to be done.
That great catch, Felicia. You're right about that. The trainings are imperative.
We have another question from Jessica Cry. She wants to know if anyone knows what's going on with the Bradford grant. Do we know how they're deciding which counties and cities will receive these funds? Lynn, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, that money has already been handed out. Essentially, any city in California that said that had a social equity program or said they were going to have one got an allocation. So LA got probably the largest. We're the largest city. We have the biggest social equity effort. Oakland got some. Sacramento got some. Couple cities in, I think, up north got some. So a number of cities got the money. The question
Oakland
is
actually
really,
got more than us in LA, just by
Okay.
a little tiny bit. They got a little bit more than us, primarily because I think they just have a program that's running.
right. But the question then becomes, I think, what are those cities doing with that money? I mean, LA got over $10 million, so Oakland must have gotten that much, Felicia. So that's really the question.
Hopefully not paying the police for overtime like we had to deal with last year. I mean, last year we had to deal with them actually allocating money into an overtime budget when we raised these questions. To be honest with you, like I'm going to come back later this year and remind an elected official that they promised us to write a ballot measure that at least allocated those 25% so we don't have to do the work. With the exception of getting people to vote on it. And that's not even enough, to be honest. Like, I want the whole bag at this point.
I think that's really the question is in these, and this was in the chat, I tried to answer it, but what happens, so we need to understand how does the money end up with the police, right? One thing is the state revenue allocation. Now, in California, we pre-designated the state revenues into 3 big buckets, really 4 buckets. The first bucket was our community reinvestment fund. $50 million a year goes into that in California. Money that goes directly back to communities that have been most impacted. Once you take that off the top and a few other grants, including one to California Highway Patrol, a smaller one, $2 million a year, $3 million a year to medical research, et cetera. Once you take that stuff off the top, the state revenues are divided into 3 buckets. 50% goes into drug treatment and services, 20% goes into environmental cleanup and remediation, and the remaining 20% goes to local government who are not banning. And just as a reminder, 80% of cities and counties in California are banning commercial cannabis. So for those who aren't banning, they have access to that 20%. Now that 20% can be used for policing, although it doesn't have to be, but it often is. But that's really not the main way police are getting the cannabis money. They're getting it through the cities. Because you look at the city of LA and what we did here, unfortunately through Measure M, was we gave all the tax revenue directly to the general fund. That is the death knell. And everybody needs to understand that you never want the money to go to the general fund because that's when the politicians get to use it as their slush fund to do whatever they want. And politicians always give it to police. So in LA, we saw that all of that money that our Office of Cannabis Control had no money, none. They didn't have enough money to hire a consultant for the first 2 years because even while the city was taking in tens of millions in cannabis revenue, all because that went straight to the general fund. And then the politicians wouldn't give the office any money to do the community outreach, even let people know there was going to be an opportunity for priority licensing for impacted people. So people didn't know, you had to be in the know. And then as Felicia mentioned, what happened was after the cannabis revenues exceeded the budget by 10 million, they swept in there, the council and the mayor, and gave that 10 million to LAPD on top of their $2 billion annual budget. They got another 10 million of our extra cannabis revenues, and all of that went to police over time. So if folks are thinking about how to intercept this, when we have these local measures that allocate tax revenues, make sure you predetermine where that money goes like we did at the state. Not that we did a perfect job, but we did not want the governor to be able to use our cannabis revenue as he wanted to. We wanted to make sure we had earmarked that fund.
Yeah, I was going to ask this question, but Jackie McGowan worded it better. Is there a model social equity ordinance that could be copied? We need a template. Is there one out there? No, not yet.
You said, I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? A model social equity
Ordinance that could be copied.
I don't think there's a model one out there. I don't think so. I think that we've tried to write some. At MRCC, we've definitely tried that. What's actually out there is not been taken in its full entirety. It's always been compromised, always been compromised. So I think that do poor Black people have social equity ordinances written up? Yes, I've written one up myself. I have, and not everything that I put on there was taken. So I'm not listened to. So they do exist. Do they exist in law, legislation? No, because we're still not listening to poor Black people. I just want to, Felicia, you really captured something I want to harp on. It's just that, like, you know, as far as this conversation, please keep in mind on this panel, like, we're still all cisgender people. My Black transgender people are still being unheard of, and their contributions to the cannabis industry is still not being discussed. We're only now talking about Marsha Johnson. We still have not discussed the people, the Black transgender community of cannabis. They're still not being brought forth to the table. So it's really important, like, when I talk, like, I realize there's a lot of other people around me who are not even being seen, never mind heard, right now. And it hurts me a lot. It saddens me a lot, because they have such great solutions, you guys. They have, like, such beautiful things for us as a society. And if we just humbled ourselves and decentered ourselves and took a moment to listen, we could really have something beautiful all together, you know, in this industry. But we have to stop being so greedy, and deprogramming. I'm trying to shift away from saying greedy and going to deprogramming, because it's not our fault that our minds were trained like this. That was beyond us. It was all inflicted upon all of us. So I'm trying to say that. But at the end of the day, there still is a spirit of greed. Because once you know better, you do better. So when you choose not to do better, then, you know, that's your choice.
Corporatize would be an appropriate word. I was wondering if you could, if you know of a text or a website where people could find out more information about how to run cooperatives. I think it's a really powerful idea that a lot of people don't think about, but it's truly how agriculture was started in this country, and would be a great model for cannabis if we could ever get it going together.
Yes, I absolutely would love to. I'm also going to shamelessly plug the fact that in Massachusetts, we are fighting for a social equity fund. So we're behind you guys in California. I know you guys passed yours. You guys got a 25% going towards your fund. Right now, the way they have it written, they rewrote it. My coworker, Kamani, actually wrote 1123. They rewrote it to 2650, Bill S 2650. And they've stripped it down so that it just creates a fund. But we wanted to create the fund, and they said a loan is social equity. We was like, how the hell are we supposed to shop a loan? That's not social equity. So we want it to work like a grant, but in Massachusetts, that's too radical. So we're asking for a loan forgiveness program to be added towards it. We're asking for a one-to-one, and that's so that general applicants and social equity applicants are matched. Right now, I think we have maybe like around 15, less than 20 social equity and economic empowerment licenses out, versus like around 100 or so general applicants. That's your corporate rich white dudes that got the money, you know, rich people, period, that got the money. They're the ones that's open up as general applicants. So we want to cap that and make it equal. No more general applicants. We don't want that money going out. We want to support local, you guys, support local. So that's why we're trying to get that written in there, because that is equity. As well as the third part that we're asking for is loan forgiveness. More than 10%. They're trying to play us with 10%, you guys. So we're saying we want 100%. You know, when I talked to the senator, he was like, oh, but you know, the money's also going towards like opiate crisis. I was like, well, you guys, I really wanted to say you didn't give a rat's ass with Black people on crack, but I didn't say that. I held my tongue, you know, and I was just like, well, you know, I have nothing against, and I don't, money going towards opiate clinics. I really don't. But at the end of the day, there's people that suffered from the war on drugs, and they're still being considered last. Why is that? Why is that? Cannabis is not habit forming. Why is this money not treating the people that actually suffered from using it or dealing with it, even touching the plant? Why are they being considered last when this money is dispersed out? So that's something I gave that senator to think about. They didn't really have an answer for me. But those are the three things that we're fighting for. And I'm sorry, I just had to do a shameless plug. So to answer your question on cooperatives, really easy. There's a beautiful book called Collective Courage by Jessica Nembard. If you could please read that book, I think we would be in a much more beautiful place. There's also some phenomenal people doing trainings that I would recommend. In Boston, we have Didi Delgado. She's a beautiful anti-racist trainer. I would suggest to support that person, Didi, D-I-D-I, Delgado. There's some beautiful, radical femme collectives, Women of Color and Solidarity. I took a phenomenal training through them. It's important to always tell who your teachers are. I do the same thing in my bicycling community, and I do the same thing in cannabis. I'm learning to grow now. Because the power is in the consumers. And what the consumers want is craft cannabis. And please believe this is just the beginning of it in Massachusetts, because what we're really going for is a craft cannabis farmers market. Fuck the bullshit. Nobody wants fucking dispensaries. Don't nobody give a fuck about that shit. Everybody that's greedy that wanted to play their hand and go ahead for the capitalism, go ahead. You played yourself. What we really want to do is, because you can home grow, is just let people be able to sell their shit and get it tested. And if you could test it, then the state should be able to create farmers markets, right? So everybody, that's the other ticket. Cooperatives and craft cannabis farmers market. And then they'll have to pay for the lots and the location and the security and all that bullshit. Throw that ball right back at them. That's not on us, that's on you. You handle that and make it happen now. That's how we got to talk to them, you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to do that in Long Beach, California next year. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen.
Yes. So excited.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Lynn, so on the same topic of an ideal ordinance with Prop 64, do you think that we can, do you think regulatory fixes are enough at this point in regards to social equity, or are we at some point going to have to run another initiative?
So the thing about social equity at the state level is because affirmative action is illegal in California, we were not able to write in any specific social justice, social equity benchmarks into Prop 64. But as folks may know, right now, we get a chance to vote to reinstate affirmative action in California. This is a battle that goes back to 1996. It was one of my early fights. When I was at UC Berkeley at the time, they first ended affirmative action there. And then with Proposition 209, we ended affirmative action statewide in California. Constitutionally, we made it illegal. So when we were writing Prop 64, we didn't have a lot of ways that we could really work in the social equity goals into state law. But if we pass ACA 5, which will be on the November ballot to reinstate affirmative action, then yeah, I'd be happy to go back to the ballot and do this right in the largest jurisdiction on earth that has legal cannabis. But unless we have affirmative action, there's not much we can do at the state level. But we do need a statewide ballot measure potentially to fix our high tax rates. I think to reproportion the tax revenue, because there was a lot of political compromises we had to make in 2015 when we were drafting that today we would not have to make. So anybody's got $20 million, I'm down, I'm ready to run another ballot measure to fix and improve Prop 64.
That's the thing, the money, right? Talking about the arrests, my daughter and her husband are public defenders in Orange County, and they've been, what's the proposition that made all drug things misdemeanor? What was that?
Prop 47.
47, that's right. Ever since that passed, the DAs were encouraging law enforcement, and they're doing it. My daughter gets 2 cases at least a day on this. They're going up to people and they're saying, you don't have any drugs on you. I'm sure you don't, but I need you to come in and sign some paperwork, and then you'll just be on your way. And the second they walk through the door, they pick up a felony for smuggling drugs into a jail facility.
That sounds very strange to me, and I would love to talk to them directly to find out what's going on. But I also want to remind folks that Prop 47 is about to be repealed because the cops have gotten together and they have a ballot measure also on the upcoming November election to repeal Prop 47, where we finally defelonize drug possession. So we really need to keep our eyes open because we can make one step forward and then the cops and their allies push us 2 steps back. So Susan, please put me in touch with them directly. That doesn't sound right, but I can look into it.
What's the proposition number for the repeal of, do you know?
It doesn't have a number yet, but it's sponsored by Assemblymember Brad Cooper, who's a former cop, African-American, Democrat, and he is leading the charge to repeal Prop 47 and Prop 57, 2 of our biggest criminal justice reforms of the last decade.
Wow. Wow.
I'll be putting out a justice slate that I'll send to you. You can get out to the list.
Thank you. Yeah, wow.
One last question.
Yeah.
We have a question from Mario Fernandez, and he asks, for the people of color panelists, what are the thoughts of large corporations and holding companies specifically targeting equity partners and licenses to gain ground in the industry?
You want to go? You want to go or you want me to go?
You know, so I'm trying to hear what you had to say.
So this is what's happening in Massachusetts. First of all, it's horrific. Like, it's horrible. We all know that. It's horrible, right? But they're like really sleuth at it in Massachusetts. So they've gotten a group of like Black capitalists on their side. And they've actually written a report, you guys, that actually has some truthful things. But if you don't know statistics and shit, you're going to end up at Z when your ass should have landed up at, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just brought you to a really false conclusion. And the false conclusion was that it's trying to pitch it mandatory for social equity applicants to be matched with general applicants, like as a business, that you're forced to partner because SEE applicants don't have capital. And they're trying to force it as a compromise. Not only are they trying to force it, but you have to give up equity within your business. Do you hear that? You have to give, and that's small amounts. They're trying to negotiate the 51% down. The CCC, the Cannabis Control Commission, is trying to negotiate the 51%. And in the process, they're reviewing all the regulations now. And it just went through a fluff, a month ago about the 51% being brought down to like 10%. And they said that was a typo because there was so much blowback from the cannabis community, the Black cannabis community on that, So it's horrific in Massachusetts, the things that go, I mean, this is every day. It's like, boom, like something else. It's really, really horrible here. But the Black capitalists are matched with them. So there's no cooperation going on here. And so I have to really be like laser focused and just focus on that, because you will get distracted, people are all, everybody's screaming Black Lives Matter. You have to remember there's a whole lot of actors, and not all skin folk are kinfolk. And at the end of the day, racism did affect everyone, Black people included. So we're all in this together. We have to practice intersectionality, and who is practicing intersectionality? And so you have to watch people. You have to really see what they're about and who they're aligned with and who they're supporting and who they're not supporting, and, have conversations and develop network. You know what I'm saying? I'm on LinkedIn. I posted up on there the other day, being on LinkedIn as an anti-capitalist is like being in the sunken place. It is scary. The cognitive dissonance that's going on here is scary, like frightening, but there's no winning with them. There's no winning for them. There's no compromise with them. And I think people have to start understanding that there's no compromise with capitalism, you guys. You guys got to get that through your head. There's no compromise with capitalism. Capitalism is the back. It supports systemic racism. So you cannot say Black Lives Matter and then be a capitalist. If you are, then you're a front. And that's just that, period.
Yeah. Paul, can you share a
Hi.
little? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought to maybe
Thank you.
add some things. I hope that the conversation that we're having here is not going to be done in a vacuum. Some of the language that I have heard throughout this dialogue is crucial. And I hope that there's a way that this language can get to the meaningful Black power structure, because you all were not hearing this. And quite frankly, Sister Saskia, my first time meeting you, girl, lady, woman, whatever you're, it's enlightening, and even I haven't heard some of this language. So I hope to get out to Boston and get enlightened and get informed. This newer generation is older, it's got a whole new way of thinking. Unfortunately, I have a bachelor's in business. I'm a businessman. So, and I also was in the military. So I'm ingrained in my thinking as well to probably some things that I need to unlearn. And here we are at an opportunity to do that. So I've been gifted by knowing this guy, and then by getting to meet you, that I get brought into this conversation. I'm just hoping that it doesn't stay in a small vacuum, because it's so important and it's so valuable. And we get it. We can hear you. We're not dumb. We just need to hear it. And we need to hear it more often.
Yeah, we have to get poor Black people. You guys, anytime you see a rich Black person talking about reparations, scream in horror for me. Just scream in horror for me, okay? Because they're out of touch. You have to have your young, poor, hood femme. And until they're sitting at the table, there is no equity being discussed. I'm taking up space, you guys.
Oh, we know.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, and I was it hasn't worked.
Yeah. So until we're all working as agents together to speak to those people, to speak, who is it? Bill Johnson or Michael Jordan or whatever those, Beyonce, whoever they are. You know what I'm saying? To get them to understand that you too have been adapted into a system. And so you too have to recognize your part with them. You still have to complicity. Like we've all been complicit. And we have to acknowledge that. And we have to ask people for forgiveness. And for white people, it is a constant ask every day. You have failed your Black human brethren. You have failed us. Every day, instead of saying hello, you should be saying, I apologize for failing to protect you today. Every day, that is your hello to us, because we are hurt every day. Every day we are devastated, so that should be the apology. Every time you say thank you, you're not thank you. It's you ask that Black person for their Cash App or their Venmo, because what they learned cost them blood, sweat, and tears. We have to get crystal clear with one another. Crystal clear on one another in communication with one another. This is what I'm learning with white people. I have to be very clear and simple in what I'm asking for. I've been saying lately, if you love me, give me land. If you love me, give me land. Like Eartha Kitt said, give me land, give me land, give me land. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm trying to build a prosperous community. And if you have that vision, hit me up. Hit me up. I'm about a prosperous community, and for people to be thriving. And that's who I'm hoping to connect. I hope that's people who hit me up after this, discussions. And I will share all of my knowledge, all of the places that I've learned things from. I am not a hoarder. You do not need degrees. You do not need degrees you do not need any degrees to be certified in understanding racism. That is too part of racism. You do not need all the degrees for all of that, Poor Black people have a PhD in racism. They do. Firsthand experience, they do. So we just have to respect that everything is being deconstructed right now. And we all have the time. We all have the time, because we all stuck in because of COVID, to learn and listen, and listen to our youth that are really teaching us some really dope stuff.
Amen. Amen. Let's hear it, everybody. Amen.
Yes. Our growers don't have degrees. You guys, please don't let them educational institutionalize the cannabis. Please don't let them do that. I'm trying to protect my growers right now. I go live bi-weekly, and I invite all my growers to pull up and converse, and for people that want to learn to grow, and you can laugh at me and stumble with me as I'm learning to grow. You know what I'm saying? Because really, growers just want to grow fire shit, and consumers just want to smoke fire shit. So really, that's all I care about is like the community.
Yep.
I don't know what the fuck everybody else is talking about, but I'm just here for the plant. You know, I'm here for the plant and everything. And that's how, to me, that's how the culture is. It's a very giving plant. And it gives so much to us. You know, so if we could just honor the spirit of cannabis, you know, then we could go so much further if we just listen. You know, everything I'm saying is because of this plant. This plant is like pulled me to say these words out of it. You know, so the spirit of the cannabis plant is very strong. We have to walk in honor of it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for participating in this really important discussion. And we will continue to talk and do until we get this right.